Hello and welcome. Today, I'm going to whisper to you the incredible and mysterious story of one of the most famous pharaohs in history, Tutankhamun. His name, forever etched into the annals of history, represents not only the power of the ancient Egyptian civilization but also the deep mysteries that still surround his life and death. Imagine a time, over 3,000 years ago, where the sands of Egypt whispered tales of mighty pharaohs and deities. Tutankhamun, a young boy, born into royalty, was thrust onto the throne of one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. His short life as a ruler was marked by significant changes in religion and governance, all while being surrounded by political intrigue and the weight of a dynasty in transition. His tomb, discovered thousands of years after his death, revealed treasures that dazzled the world, golden artifacts, intricate jewelry, and a funerary mask that still mesmerizes with its beauty. But this story is more than just gold and treasure. It's about the enigma of a boy king whose reign, though brief, left a lasting mark on history. Throughout this video, we'll uncover the secrets of Tutankhamun's lineage, the powerful figures who influenced his reign, and the eerie legends of curses that surrounded his tomb's discovery. We'll also delve into his life as a young ruler and the fascinating world of ancient Egypt during his time. But for now, I want you to forget the present. Sit back, relax, and let yourself be transported back to the heart of Egypt. Let the whispers of time take you to a world filled with majestic pyramids, golden sands, and the timeless allure of a pharaoh whose story still captivates us to this day. Tutankhamun's birth and family. Tutankhamun was born around 1341 BCE, during the height of ancient Egypt's 18th dynasty. He was a descendant of a long line of powerful pharaohs, but his father, Akhenaten, stood out as one of the most controversial rulers in Egypt's history. Akhenaten's reign was defined by his radical religious reforms, which shifted the kingdom from its traditional polytheistic worship to a monotheistic belief centered around the god Aten, the sun disk. Akhenaten's decision to promote Aten above all other gods not only changed Egypt's religious structure but also disrupted the power dynamics of the kingdom. The priests of Ammonius, who had long held immense influence and wealth through their temples, were sidelined. Akhenaten ordered the closure of temples dedicated to Ammonius and redirected resources to the construction of a new city, Akhenaten, modern-day Amarna, which was dedicated to the worship of Aten. This upheaval created deep divisions within the country, and many in the upper echelons of Egyptian society, particularly the priests, resented the new religious order. Tutankhamun was born into this environment of religious and political tension. His father's religious reforms were groundbreaking, but they were also divisive, leaving the kingdom fractured. Akhenaten's singular devotion to Aten alienated the traditional power structures, creating unrest among both the priesthood and the people, many of whom continued to worship the traditional gods in private. The identity of Tutankhamun's mother is still debated among historians. Some believe that Queen Nefertiti, Akhenaten's great royal wife, was his mother, while others suggest that he may have been born to one of Akhenaten's lesser-known wives. Regardless of her identity, his mother played a crucial role in his early life, as did the broader royal family. The complex dynamics of Akhenaten's court would have shaped the environment in which young Tutankhamun grew up. Though Akhenaten's focus was primarily on religion, his reign had other significant impacts on Egypt's geopolitical landscape. His neglect of foreign relations led to weakened ties with Egypt's neighbors. Trade suffered, and diplomatic relationships, particularly with the surrounding Near Eastern powers, deteriorated. This further contributed to the instability that would plague Egypt during and after Akhenaten's reign. Tutankhamun's birth marked him as the heir to a kingdom in turmoil, and his family, particularly his father, would cast a long shadow over his brief reign. As the son of a revolutionary pharaoh, he was born into an Egypt divided by religious strife and weakened by poor diplomatic decisions. His name, Tutankhamun, originally reflected his father's devotion to Aten, meaning the living image of Aten. However, this name would later be changed to Tutankhamun, signaling a return to the worship of Ammonius, a crucial development in the young pharaoh's life. Thus, Tutankhamun's early years were shaped by his family's legacy of religious transformation, the political instability caused by his father's policies, and the looming challenge of restoring Egypt's fractured identity. His birth into this complex and contentious environment set the stage for the struggles he would face as a young ruler tasked with repairing the kingdom his father had reshaped. Tutankhamun's childhood and ascension to the throne. Tutankhamun's childhood unfolded in a time of great religious upheaval and political uncertainty. Born in the royal palace of Akhenaten, the new capital city founded by his father, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun spent his early years surrounded by the profound cultural and spiritual transformations that his father's reign had ushered in. Akhenaten, also known as Amarna, was unlike any other Egyptian city. It was a monument to Akhenaten's singular devotion to Aten, the sun disk, and a symbol of his radical religious reforms. For a child born into this environment, the splendor of the city and the fervor of Aten worship would have been ever present. Tutankhamun, originally named Tutankhaten, meaning the living image of Aten, was likely raised to believe in the supremacy of his father's god. Akhenaten's new religious order replaced the long-established polytheistic system with a form of monotheism focused entirely on Aten. Temples to other gods were abandoned or repurposed, and worship of gods like Ammonius, Osiris, and Ra became forbidden. This would have had a profound impact on young Tutankhamun's worldview, as he was likely educated under the tutelage of priests loyal to Aten, learning about the importance of the sun god in daily life and the divine right of the pharaoh to rule as Aten's representative on earth. Despite the luxury of his upbringing, Tutankhamun's childhood was marked by political tensions and uncertainty. His father's religious reforms had deeply divided the Egyptian elite. The priesthood of Ammonius, which had been one of the most powerful institutions in the kingdom, was stripped of its influence and resources, leading to widespread dissatisfaction among the religious and political establishment. As a result, while Akhenaten's family enjoyed a life of privilege in their new city, much of Egypt was in a state of unrest. Tutankhamun's role in the royal family was significant from birth, though it is unclear how much of the political strife he would have been directly aware of as a child. Egyptian royal children were often raised with a strict education that prepared them for leadership, and Tutankhamun would have been no exception. He would have been taught to read and write, a rare skill in ancient Egypt, and educated in the religious and political traditions of his people. His teachers likely included high-ranking officials and priests who were still loyal to his father's cause, instilling in him the values of Atenism and the responsibilities of a future pharaoh. However, Akhenaten's focus on religious matters meant that Egypt's foreign policy and internal governance suffered. Egypt's empire, once the most powerful in the ancient world, began to show signs of decline. Akhenaten's neglect of military and diplomatic affairs weakened Egypt's influence over its vassal states in the Near East, leading to rebellions and the loss of territory. These growing tensions both within and beyond Egypt's borders created an unstable environment, one that young Tutankhamun would inherit upon his father's death. It is believed that Tutankhamun ascended to the throne at the age of around 9, following Akhenaten's death. His rise to power came at a critical moment in Egypt's history. Akhenaten's radical reforms had left the kingdom divided, both religiously and politically. There was pressure from the old religious institutions to restore the worship of the traditional gods, particularly Ammonius, and to return the kingdom to the practices that had sustained Egypt for centuries. At the same time, there were still loyalists to Atenism who supported Akhenaten's vision and wished to see his reforms continue. As a young boy, Tutankhamun was likely heavily influenced by the regents and advisors who surrounded him. His youth meant that he was not yet able to fully govern Egypt on his own, and key figures such as I, who served as a close advisor to Akhenaten, and Horemheb, a powerful military commander, played crucial roles in guiding the young king's decisions. I, in particular, is thought to have been a stabilizing force during the early years of Tutankhamun's reign, helping to navigate the political landscape and steer the kingdom back toward traditional practices. One of the first significant decisions made during Tutankhamun's reign was to move away from Akhenaten's religious reforms. The young king's name was changed from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun, signaling a return to the worship of Ammonius. This name change was not merely symbolic, it represented a broader shift in policy. The temples of Ammonius were reopened, and resources were redirected back to the traditional religious centers. This move helped to placate the powerful priesthood of Ammonius, who had been alienated during Akhenaten's reign, and restored some measure of stability to the kingdom. Despite this return to tradition, Tutankhamun's reign remained fraught with challenges. The young king's advisors had to work diligently to repair the damage done by Akhenaten's neglect of Egypt's foreign relations. Neighboring states that had once been loyal to Egypt had begun to assert their independence, and there were ongoing threats from powerful rivals such as the Hittites. Egypt's military, weakened by years of neglect, had to be rebuilt, and diplomatic ties had to be restored in order to secure Egypt's borders and maintain its influence in the region. Tutankhamun's youth meant that much of the decision-making during his reign was carried out by his regents and advisors, but the symbolic importance of his rule cannot be overstated. As the last male heir of the 18th dynasty, his ascension to the throne represented a hope for the restoration of Egypt's former glory. His reign marked the beginning of a return to the traditional values that had sustained Egypt for centuries, even as the kingdom struggled to recover from the religious and political upheaval of his father's rule. Tutankhamun's marriage to Ankhesenamun, his half-sister and daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, also played a role in solidifying his position on the throne. Marriages within the royal family were common in ancient Egypt, as they helped to preserve the purity of the bloodline and reinforce the divine nature of the pharaoh's rule. Ankhesenamun, though young herself, became a key figure in Tutankhamun's reign, and together they worked to restore stability to the kingdom. Despite the brevity of his reign, Tutankhamun's ascension to the throne marked a turning point in Egypt's history. The young boy, once raised in the shadow of his father's controversial religious reforms, became the symbol of a return to the old ways. His reign, though short, was a crucial step in the restoration of Egypt's traditional religious and political structures, a legacy that would be solidified by his advisors and successors in the years following his death. Tutankhamun's Egypt, the social, political, and religious landscape. Tutankhamun ascended to the throne during a pivotal moment in Egyptian history, a time when the kingdom was grappling with the consequences of Akhenaten's radical reforms. Egypt, once a stable and prosperous civilization, had been deeply divided by the religious upheaval caused by Akhenaten's devotion to Aten, the sun disk. To understand Tutankhamun's reign, it is essential to explore the social, political, and religious landscape of Egypt during this tumultuous period. Social structure in Tutankhamun's Egypt. Ancient Egyptian society was highly stratified, with a strict hierarchy that determined one's role in life. At the top of the social pyramid was the pharaoh, who was considered a divine figure, ruling as the earthly representative of the gods. Below the pharaoh were the nobles, high-ranking officials, and priests who wielded significant power and influence in both the government and religious spheres. The priesthood, particularly the priests of Ammonius, held a considerable amount of wealth and control over the country's vast temple complexes. These temples were not only religious centers but also served as hubs of economic and political activity. The temples on large tracts of land employed thousands of workers and managed extensive resources. This made the priesthood a powerful force in Egyptian society, one that Akhenaten had sought to diminish during his reign. The middle class in Egypt consisted of skilled artisans, scribes, and traders who contributed to the economy through their craftsmanship and knowledge. Scribes, in particular, held a respected position in society as they were responsible for maintaining records, overseeing government administration, and documenting important events. Artisans created the magnificent tombs, statues, and temples that have come to define ancient Egyptian culture. They were highly valued for their skills, especially during times of royal construction projects, such as the building of a Tutankhamun. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were the farmers, laborers, and slaves who made up the vast majority of the population. These individuals worked the land, produced food, and constructed the monumental buildings that symbolized the pharaoh's power. Life for the lower classes was often harsh, with long hours of labor in the fields or on construction sites. However, the agricultural wealth of the Nile Valley ensured that Egypt remained one of the most prosperous civilizations in the ancient world, even during periods of political instability. During Tutankhamun's reign, the social order began to stabilize as the kingdom returned to more traditional values. Akhenaten's religious reforms had disrupted the established social structure by sidelining the powerful priesthood of Ammonius, but with the reinstatement of the old gods, the balance of power shifted back to the traditional elite. This return to stability would have been essential in maintaining the pharaoh's authority and ensuring the loyalty of the powerful figures who helped govern the kingdom. Political landscape. The political landscape of Egypt during Tutankhamun's reign was one of recovery and restoration. Akhenaten's focus on religious matters had caused significant neglect in foreign policy and military affairs. Egypt's once dominant position in the region had weakened as vassal states in the Near East, such as Canaan and Nubia, began to assert their independence. The Hittites, a rising power in Anatolia, were also becoming a significant threat to Egypt's influence in the region. Tutankhamun's reign was marked by efforts to rebuild Egypt's international standing and restore its prestige. While Tutankhamun himself was too young to directly influence these policies, his regents, particularly Horemheb, took steps to re-establish Egypt's authority in foreign affairs. Horemheb, who would later become pharaoh, was a skilled military commander and played a crucial role in reorganizing Egypt's military forces and reasserting control over its territories. Diplomatic ties were also restored with other great powers of the time, including the Mitanni and the Babylonians. Egypt's foreign relations during this period were maintained through a combination of military strength and diplomacy, including strategic marriages and alliances. The Egyptian Empire's borders, particularly in Nubia to the south, were reinforced, and military campaigns were launched to suppress uprisings in the vassal states. Within Egypt itself, the political situation was dominated by the efforts to undo the damage caused by Akhenaten's religious revolution. Akhenaten had centralized power around his own vision of the state religion, which left many traditional centers of power, such as Thebes, in a weakened position. With the return to polytheism, Thebes once again became the religious and cultural heart of the kingdom. This restoration of Thebes and the Ammonius priesthood helped to stabilize the internal political situation as the old power structures were re-established. Tutankhamun's government worked to rebuild the economy, which had suffered under Akhenaten's rule. Resources were redirected from Akhetaten back to the traditional temples and cities, and the economic foundations of Egypt, based on agriculture and trade, were revitalized. The Nile continued to provide the lifeblood of the Egyptian economy, ensuring the prosperity of the kingdom even during times of political turmoil. Religious landscape. Religion was at the heart of Egyptian life, and during Tutankhamun's reign, the religious landscape underwent a significant transformation. Akhenaten's attempt to impose monotheism had disrupted centuries of religious tradition, and his successors were tasked with restoring the old ways. Tutankhamun's name change from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun signaled this return to the worship of Ammonius, the chief god of Thebes, and the reinstatement of the traditional pantheon of gods. The restoration of polytheism was not just a religious decision but a political one as well. The priesthood of Ammonius, which had been sidelined during Akhenaten's reign, regained its influence and power. Temples dedicated to Ammonius were reopened, and the wealth and resources that had been diverted to Aten were returned to the traditional religious institutions. This move helped to secure the loyalty of the priesthood, which was essential for maintaining the pharaoh's authority. The religious festivals and rituals that had been neglected under Akhenaten were once again celebrated. These festivals, such as the Opet festival in Thebes, were not only religious events but also opportunities for the pharaoh to display his power and reaffirm his connection to the gods. The restoration of these ceremonies helped to unify the kingdom and re-establish the social order that had been disrupted by Akhenaten's reforms. While the worship of Aten did not completely disappear, it was relegated to a minor role in Egyptian religion. The temples of Aten were abandoned, and Akhetaten itself was largely deserted after Tutankhamun's reign. The young pharaoh's government worked to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy, and his name was stricken from the official records. This act of damnatio memoriae, or the erasure of a person's legacy, was a common practice in ancient Egypt for rulers who were deemed to have brought dishonor to the kingdom. The religious reforms under Tutankhamun's reign helped to heal the divisions within Egyptian society and restored the traditional religious practices that had sustained the kingdom for centuries. The return to the worship of Ammonius and the reinstatement of the old gods were essential steps in re-establishing the cultural and political stability of the kingdom. Tutankhamun's reign and reforms. When Tutankhamun became pharaoh, Egypt was in a fragile state. His father, Akhenaten, had radically changed the country by shifting the religious focus entirely toward the god Aten, ignoring centuries of tradition and leaving Egypt's political and military strength in disarray. One of the first significant areas that Tutankhamun's reign had to address was the military, which had been neglected during his father's rule. Under Akhenaten, foreign policy and military matters had taken a back seat to religious reform. This neglect had weakened Egypt's grip on its territories in the Near East and Nubia. Neighboring powers, such as the Hittites, had taken advantage of this lapse, and rebellions had broken out in Egypt's vassal states, threatening the stability of the empire. Tutankhamun, still a child at the time of his ascension, relied heavily on his advisors to help stabilize the kingdom. Horemheb, who would later become Pharaoh himself, was appointed as commander-in-chief of the army and played a crucial role in revitalizing Egypt's military. Horemheb's influence in military matters cannot be understated. He initiated reforms that reorganized the army, improved discipline, and ensured that Egypt's military was prepared to face both internal unrest and external threats. One of the most pressing issues was the re-establishment of control over Egypt's vassal states, particularly in Canaan and Syria. During Tutankhamun's reign, military campaigns were launched to quell uprisings and reassert Egyptian dominance in these regions. Horemheb led many of these efforts, working to restore Egypt's reputation as a formidable military power. These campaigns were not only necessary for maintaining Egypt's territorial integrity but also vital for the flow of tribute from these regions, which was essential to the kingdom's economy. Additionally, Tutankhamun's government worked to restore Egypt's defensive infrastructure. The fortresses along Egypt's borders, particularly in Nubia, were repaired and reinforced. These fortifications were crucial for protecting the kingdom from incursions by neighboring powers, such as the Libyans to the west and the Nubians to the south. The strengthening of Egypt's defenses under Horemheb's direction helped to secure the kingdom and protect it from the external threats that had grown during Akhenaten's neglect. Diplomacy was also an important aspect of Tutankhamun's reign. The restoration of Egypt's military strength was accompanied by efforts to rebuild diplomatic ties with neighboring states. Diplomatic marriages, treaties, and the exchange of gifts were common practices in the ancient world, and Tutankhamun's government made use of these tools to ensure peaceful relations with powerful neighbors such as the Mitanni, Babylonians, and even the Hittites, with whom Egypt had previously been in conflict. These diplomatic efforts were crucial in maintaining a balance of power in the region, as Egypt sought to reassert its influence without provoking direct conflict. Tutankhamun's reign also marked a return to military expeditions in Nubia, where Egyptian control had weakened. Nubia was a key source of wealth for Egypt, particularly for its gold mines. The expeditions into Nubia were not only about re-establishing control but also about securing the economic lifeblood that these mines provided. Gold from Nubia had long been a cornerstone of Egypt's wealth, and under Tutankhamun's reign, efforts were made to ensure that this valuable resource was once again flowing into Egypt's coffers. Beyond the restoration of military power and diplomatic relations, Tutankhamun's reign also saw the reinstitution of military rituals and ceremonies that had been neglected under Akhenaten. The traditional role of the pharaoh as a warrior king, responsible for protecting Egypt and leading its armies, was reinstated. Tutankhamun, though young and not personally involved in battle, was depicted in military regalia in various artistic representations. These depictions were important for maintaining the image of the pharaoh as the ultimate protector of Egypt, a role that had been somewhat diminished during Akhenaten's focus on religious matters. By the end of Tutankhamun's reign, Egypt's military and political position had significantly improved. Though he was only a boy during most of his time on the throne, the efforts of his advisors, particularly Horemheb, had successfully restored Egypt's army to a position of strength and re-established control over its territories. This military revival laid the groundwork for the stability that would follow in the years after Tutankhamun's death. Religious reforms. While military matters were critical, one of the most defining aspects of Tutankhamun's reign was his reversal of Akhenaten's religious reforms. Akhenaten's focus on Aten had caused widespread discontent among both the people and the powerful priesthood of Ammonius. Under Akhenaten, The worship of Aten had been promoted at the expense of the traditional gods, especially Ammonius, whose temples had been stripped of their wealth and influence. Upon becoming pharaoh, one of the most symbolic moves Tutankhamun made was to change his name from Tutankhamun, the living image of Aten, to Tutankhamun, the living image of Ammonius. This was more than just a personal decision. It was a clear statement that Egypt was returning to the worship of its traditional gods. The temples of Ammonius, which had been abandoned or repurposed during Akhenaten's reign, were restored. Resources were redirected back to these temples, and the priesthood of Ammonius regained much of its lost power and wealth. This return to the old ways helped to restore the social and religious order in Egypt. The festivals and rituals that had been neglected under Akhenaten were once again celebrated. These public ceremonies were not only religious events but also important occasions for reinforcing the authority of the pharaoh and the unity of the kingdom. The great temples at Karnak and Luxor, which had been the center of Ammonius worship, were revived as religious and cultural hubs. Tutankhamun's reign also marked an effort to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy. The temples and monuments built in honor of Aten were abandoned, and many of Akhenaten's inscriptions and statues were defaced or destroyed. This act of damnatio memoriae, or the deliberate erasure of someone's legacy, was intended to remove the stain of Akhenaten's religious reforms from Egypt's history. It was as if Tutankhamun's government was trying to restore a sense of continuity, to erase the radical break from tradition that Akhenaten had introduced. Economic and administrative reforms. Restoring Egypt's religious and military strength was only part of the challenge that Tutankhamun faced. His government also had to repair the economic damage caused by Akhenaten's focus on building his new capital, Akhetaten, at the expense of the traditional religious centers. Under Akhenaten, vast resources had been poured into the construction of this new city, leaving the traditional cities like Thebes and Memphis struggling for funding. During Tutankhamun's reign, the decision was made to abandon Akhetaten. The city, which had been the center of Aten worship, was left largely deserted, and the court returned to Thebes, the spiritual heart of Egypt. This move not only signified a return to religious tradition but also helped to redirect resources back to the temples and cities that had been neglected. The restoration of the traditional religious centers also brought economic benefits, as these temples were major economic engines, employing thousands of workers and managing vast estates. Tutankhamun's government worked to restore trade relations with Egypt's neighbors, which had suffered under Akhenaten's isolationist policies. Trade routes that had been neglected were reopened, allowing the flow of goods such as gold, incense, and exotic animals to once again enter Egypt. The wealth generated by these trade routes helped to stabilize the economy, which had been weakened by Akhenaten's focus on religious matters at the expense of foreign policy. The economic reforms implemented during Tutankhamun's reign helped to rebuild the infrastructure of Egypt. Public works projects, including the restoration of temples and monuments, provided employment for the population and helped to stimulate the economy. These efforts not only repaired the physical damage done by Akhenaten's reign but also helped to restore the kingdom's sense of pride and continuity. Tutankhamun's advisors and influential figures. Tutankhamun's reign, while often associated with the boy king himself, was deeply shaped by the powerful figures who surrounded him. Due to his young age and inexperience, Tutankhamun relied heavily on his advisors to manage the kingdom and navigate the challenges left behind by his father, Akhenaten. Two of the most influential people in his life and reign were Ai and Horemheb, who played crucial roles in guiding the pharaoh's decisions and steering Egypt back to stability. Ai, the wise regent. One of the most significant figures during Tutankhamun's reign was I, who had been a close advisor to Akhenaten and continued to serve under Tutankhamun. I held the title of God's Father, a prestigious position within the court, which indicates his deep influence in both religious and political matters. His exact relationship to the royal family is still debated, with some historians suggesting that he may have been related to Tutankhamun through marriage or blood, potentially as a brother or uncle of Nefertiti, Tutankhamun's possible stepmother. I was a key figure in the transition from Akhenaten's reign to Tutankhamun's. Having served under Akhenaten during his religious revolution, I was well positioned to understand the challenges that faced the young pharaoh. While Akhenaten's focus on Aten had isolated much of the traditional power structure in Egypt, I's role in the court likely helped him navigate the delicate process of restoring the old religious order without completely alienating those who had supported Akhenaten's reforms. As Tutankhamun's regent, I wielded significant influence over the young pharaoh. He played a critical role in advising Tutankhamun on matters of state, including the reversal of Akhenaten's religious reforms and the restoration of the traditional gods, particularly Ammonius. I was also involved in the decision to move the royal court back to Thebes, the religious and cultural heart of Egypt, after the abandonment of Akhetaten, the capital that Akhenaten had built. I's influence extended beyond religious matters. He was a skilled politician who understood the importance of balancing the demands of the powerful Ammonius priesthood with the need to maintain stability within the court. His guidance was instrumental in helping Tutankhamun navigate the complex political landscape, ensuring that the young pharaoh's reign did not become mired in conflict between rival factions within the kingdom. After Tutankhamun's death, I succeeded him as pharaoh, ruling for a brief period before Horemheb, another powerful figure in the court, took control. I's legacy is often overshadowed by his successors, but his role in stabilizing Egypt during a time of great uncertainty was crucial. His experience and political acumen helped to lay the foundation for the restoration of Egypt's traditional religious and political structures, which had been disrupted by Akhenaten's radical reforms. Horemheb, the military leader. While I was responsible for much of the religious and political guidance during Tutankhamun's reign, Horemheb was the key figure behind Egypt's military resurgence. Horemheb had been a prominent general during Akhenaten's reign, though his influence was limited during that time due to Akhenaten's focus on religious matters over military affairs. However, under Tutankhamun, Horemheb's role became much more central as Egypt sought to restore its military strength and reassert control over its territories. As commander-in-chief of the army, Horemheb was tasked with rebuilding Egypt's military, which had been neglected during Akhenaten's reign. Egypt's empire had weakened, and vassal states in Canaan and Nubia had begun to challenge Egyptian authority. Horemheb launched military campaigns to re-establish Egypt's dominance in these regions, successfully quelling uprisings and restoring the flow of tribute to Egypt's treasury. Horemheb's reforms were not limited to the battlefield. He also reorganized the army, improving discipline and ensuring that Egypt's military was prepared to defend the kingdom against both internal and external threats. Under his leadership, Egypt's borders were strengthened, and the fortresses along key points, particularly in Nubia, were reinforced. These fortifications played a crucial role in protecting Egypt from invasions and securing the kingdom's wealth, particularly the gold mines in Nubia, which were essential to Egypt's economy. Horemheb's influence went beyond military matters, as he also became a trusted political advisor to Tutankhamun. His role in restoring Egypt's military power gave him significant influence in the court, and he played a key part in the administration of the kingdom. As Tutankhamun's reign progressed, Horemheb's stature grew, and by the time of the pharaoh's death, Horemheb was one of the most powerful figures in Egypt. After I's brief reign as pharaoh, Horemheb would eventually take the throne himself. His ascension marked the end of the 18th dynasty, as he became the founder of the 19th dynasty, leading Egypt into a new era of stability and prosperity. Horemheb's legacy is one of military and administrative reform, and his time as Tutankhamun's advisor laid the groundwork for his own successful reign. Ankhesenamun, the Queen. Another influential figure in Tutankhamun's life was his wife, Ankhesenamun. As was customary in Egyptian royalty, Tutankhamun married within the family, and Ankhesenamun was likely his half-sister, the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Their marriage was arranged to preserve the royal bloodline, a practice that was common in ancient Egypt to ensure the continuity of the divine right to rule. Ankhesenamun was not just a passive figure in the background of Tutankhamun's reign. She played a crucial role in the royal court, acting as the queen and consort during a time when Egypt was trying to recover from the religious and political upheaval of Akhenaten's reign. Although there is limited information about her specific actions during Tutankhamun's reign, her presence at key moments in his life, including his burial, suggests that she held a position of significant influence. After Tutankhamun's untimely death, Ankhesenamun faced a precarious situation. As the queen of a young pharaoh who left no surviving heirs, she was in a vulnerable position. It is believed that she may have written a letter to the king of the Hittites, requesting to marry one of his sons in order to secure her position and avoid being forced into a marriage with a commoner or lesser noble. However, this plan never came to fruition, as the Hittite prince she requested was killed on his journey to Egypt, possibly by factions within the Egyptian court who opposed the idea of a foreign ruler. Ankhesenamun's fate remains a mystery. Some believe that she may have been forced to marry I, who succeeded Tutankhamun as pharaoh, while others speculate that she may have died shortly after her husband. Regardless of her ultimate fate, Ankhesenamun played a key role in Tutankhamun's reign and was one of the most important figures in his life. Tutankhamun's mysterious death. Tutankhamun's death, around 1323 BCE, at the age of 18 or 19, has long been one of the most enduring mysteries of ancient Egypt. His reign had lasted only about 10 years, and he had just begun to establish himself as pharaoh when his life was abruptly cut short. The suddenness of his death, combined with the political power struggles within the Egyptian court, sparked countless theories and speculations about what led to his demise. While modern technology has given us many clues, the full story of Tutankhamun's death remains elusive, leading historians to piece together fragments of evidence to try to understand what happened to the young king. For many years, the prevailing theory was that Tutankhamun had been murdered. This idea gained traction due to the power vacuum his death created and the quick rise of figures like I and Horemheb, who both played significant roles in the aftermath of Tutankhamun's reign. Some believe that these powerful men, eager to seize control of Egypt, might have orchestrated the young pharaoh's death to advance their own ambitions. I, who became pharaoh after Tutankhamun's death, was especially seen as a suspect, given that he would benefit the most from the pharaoh's untimely passing. When Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered by Howard Carter in 1922, researchers finally had the chance to study the young pharaoh's remains. Early X-rays of his skull seemed to show evidence of a head injury, which many interpreted as confirmation of the murder theory. Some speculated that Tutankhamun had been struck on the head, possibly by a blow from behind, leading to his death. This theory fit well with the idea of palace intrigue and assassination, given the political turmoil of the time. However, as technology improved, more advanced studies began to challenge the idea that Tutankhamun had been murdered. CT scans performed in the early 2000s provided a more detailed view of his body, revealing that the supposed head injury was not consistent with a fatal blow. Instead, it appeared that the damage to his skull might have occurred after death, possibly during the mummification process or due to the natural decay of his body over the millennia. This revelation cast doubt on the murder theory and forced researchers to explore other possibilities. One of the most significant discoveries from the CT scans was the presence of a severe fracture in Tutankhamun's left thigh. The bone was broken, and the injury appeared to have been serious enough to cause significant blood loss and potentially lead to infection. Given the importance of chariot riding in Egyptian royal life, many experts believe that Tutankhamun may have suffered a chariot accident, leading to this fatal injury. Chariot racing and hunting were both dangerous activities, and a fall from a chariot could easily have resulted in such a traumatic injury. This theory of a fatal accident fits with what we know about the pharaoh's lifestyle. As a young king, Tutankhamun would have been expected to demonstrate his strength and prowess through activities like hunting and chariot racing. If he sustained a serious injury during one of these activities, the lack of advanced medical care at the time could have made it impossible for him to recover. An infection from the wound could have set in, causing a rapid decline in his health and leading to his eventual death. Adding to the complexity of the case, genetic testing on Tutankhamun's remains revealed that he suffered from a number of genetic disorders, likely due to the close intermarriage within his family. His parents, who were almost certainly siblings, passed on a number of inherited conditions that would have affected his health throughout his life. One of the most significant of these conditions was a clubfoot, which would have made it difficult for Tutankhamun to walk unaided. In fact, numerous walking sticks and canes were found in his tomb, suggesting that the young king frequently relied on these aids to move around. In addition to his physical disabilities, Tutankhamun also suffered from other health issues. Genetic analysis revealed that he had contracted malaria multiple times during his life. Malaria was common in ancient Egypt, particularly around the Nile, where mosquitoes thrived. In Tutankhamun's case, repeated bouts of malaria would have further weakened his already fragile health. Some experts believe that his death may have been caused by a combination of his leg injury, an infection from the wound, and malaria, all of which overwhelmed his immune system and led to his demise. Another factor that may have contributed to Tutankhamun's death is the possibility of a hereditary bone disorder. His family's history of intermarriage likely led to a range of genetic problems, and some researchers have speculated that he may have suffered from a condition such as Kohler disease, which affects the bones of the feet. This would explain why Tutankhamun needed walking sticks and why he might have been more susceptible to physical injuries. The suddenness of Tutankhamun's death is reflected in the circumstances surrounding his burial. His tomb, while filled with incredible treasures, was relatively small compared to those of other pharaohs, suggesting that it was not originally intended for him. The rush to prepare his burial likely indicates that his death was unexpected, leaving the court little time to build a grander tomb. Some historians believe that his tomb may have been repurposed from a lesser noble or another royal family member. While modern science has provided many answers, some aspects of Tutankhamun's death remain a mystery. His health was clearly compromised by genetic conditions, malaria, and a possible chariot accident, but the exact cause of his death may never be fully known. What is clear, however, is that his death at such a young age left Egypt without a strong heir, leading to a period of political uncertainty and power struggles within the royal court. Despite his brief life, Tutankhamun's death and the discovery of his nearly intact tomb in 1922 have ensured that his name remains one of the most famous in all of ancient history. The treasures found in his tomb, including his iconic golden burial mask, continue to captivate the world, while the mystery of his death still invites new theories and research even today. Tutankhamun's tomb and its discovery. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter is considered one of the most significant archaeological finds in history. Before this discovery, Tutankhamun was a relatively unknown pharaoh, his reign and life overshadowed by more prominent rulers like Ramses II and Akhenaten. However, the stunning treasures found in his tomb and the nearly intact state of the burial site forever etched his name into the annals of history. The Valley of the Kings, where Tutankhamun's tomb was found, had been the burial site for many pharaohs and nobles during the New Kingdom period. By the time Carter began his search, most of the tombs in the valley had already been discovered and, unfortunately, looted in antiquity. The area was thought to have yielded all its secrets, and many archaeologists believed that no significant finds remained. However, Carter was convinced that there was still one tomb left to find, that of the little-known King Tutankhamun. Carter's work was funded by Lord Carnarvon, a wealthy British aristocrat with a passion for Egyptology. The search for Tutankhamun's tomb was a long and arduous process. For several years, Carter and his team meticulously excavated the Valley of the Kings, but their efforts yielded little success. Lord Carnarvon, frustrated by the lack of progress, considered pulling the funding. But Carter persuaded him to finance one more season of excavation. That final season, which began in November 1922, would change history. On November 4, 1922, Carter's team uncovered the top of a staircase leading down into the ground. The excitement was palpable as they realized that they had stumbled upon something significant. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a sealed door bearing the name Tutankhamun, confirmation that they had finally found the pharaoh's resting place. Behind this door lay a long passageway that led to another sealed door, which Carter hoped would lead directly to the tomb. On November 26th, Carter made a small hole in the door and, with a candle in hand, peered inside. When asked by Lord Carnarvon if he could see anything, Carter famously responded, "Yes, wonderful things." What he saw were the glittering treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb, perfectly preserved and untouched for over 3,000 years. The discovery was unprecedented. Unlike most other tombs in the Valley of the Kings, Tutankhamun's tomb had largely escaped the attention of ancient grave robbers, leaving its contents intact. Over the next several years, Carter and his team carefully excavated the tomb, revealing an astonishing array of artifacts. The tomb itself consisted of 4 main rooms: the antechamber, the annex, the burial chamber, and the treasury. Each room was filled with treasures that provided a glimpse into the wealth and splendor of ancient Egypt. The antechamber, the first room entered, contained a vast collection of furniture, chariots, statues, and other objects designed for the king's use in the afterlife. Among the items were large gilded couches and a series of life-size statues of Tutankhamun guarding the entrance to the burial chamber. These statues, with their solemn faces and regal posture, were meant to protect the king's soul as it made its journey into the afterlife. The annex, a smaller room off the antechamber, contained more everyday items, including food, wine, and perfumes, all intended to sustain the king in the next world. These goods, though less spectacular than the treasures in the main chamber, were a testament to the Egyptians' belief in the afterlife and their careful preparation for it. The most important room, of course, was the burial chamber. Inside this room was a massive stone sarcophagus, which contained 3 nested coffins. The innermost coffin, made of solid gold, held the mummified remains of Tutankhamun himself. This coffin is perhaps one of the most iconic objects from the tomb, its craftsmanship and beauty a symbol of the grandeur of ancient Egyptian art. When Carter finally opened the coffin, he found the king's body adorned with his famous gold burial mask. The mask, with its serene expression and intricate detailing, is one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. The final room, the treasury, contained more personal items such as Tutankhamun's throne, chests of jewelry, and a collection of canopic jars, which held the king's internal organs that had been removed during the mummification process. Also found in the treasury was the figure of a black jackal representing the god Anubis, the protector of the dead. This room further emphasized the importance of the afterlife in Egyptian culture, where the deceased were equipped with everything they needed to thrive in the world beyond. The discovery of the tomb was not only remarkable for the sheer volume of treasures it contained, but also for the insight it provided into the life and death of Tutankhamun. The artifacts found within the tomb, from weapons and clothing to statues of deities, offered a unique glimpse into the culture, religion, and daily life of ancient Egypt during the New Kingdom period. The tomb's relatively modest size, compared to those of other pharaohs, suggested that Tutankhamun's death had been sudden and unexpected, leaving little time for the construction of a more elaborate resting place. Despite its smaller size, the wealth and beauty of the tomb's contents have made Tutankhamun one of the most famous pharaohs in history. His golden burial mask, in particular, has become an iconic symbol of ancient Egypt and is widely regarded as one of the greatest masterpieces of ancient art. Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb captivated the world. The story of the boy king, his glittering treasures, and the mystery of his death became a global sensation. However, the excavation was not without controversy. Many of the treasures found in the tomb were removed and sent to museums around the world, sparking debates about the ethics of removing such significant cultural artifacts from their place of origin. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb also gave rise to the famous Curse of the Pharaohs, a popular myth that claimed those who disturbed the king's tomb would be struck down by a curse. This myth gained traction when several individuals associated with the discovery, including Lord Carnarvon, died under mysterious or unexpected circumstances shortly after the tomb was opened. Though these deaths were likely coincidental, the idea of a pharaoh's curse only added to the mystique surrounding Tutankhamun and his tomb. Today, the treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb are displayed in museums around the world, with the majority of the collection housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The discovery of his tomb not only revolutionized our understanding of ancient Egypt, but also solidified Tutankhamun's place as one of the most famous and enduring figures of the ancient world. Tutankhamun's tomb treasures. The treasures found in Tutankhamun's tomb are among the most famous and well-preserved artifacts from ancient Egypt. Discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, the tomb contained an astonishing array of objects meant to accompany the young pharaoh into the afterlife. These treasures not only highlight the wealth and artistic achievements of ancient Egypt, but also provide a window into the beliefs and daily life of the time. Tutankhamun's tomb was filled with over 5,000 individual items, ranging from everyday objects to the most luxurious gold and precious stones. These objects were placed in the tomb to ensure that the king had everything he would need to sustain himself in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that life after death was a continuation of the earthly existence, and it was essential that the deceased be properly equipped for this journey. As a result, Tutankhamun's tomb was packed with items designed to provide comfort, status, and protection in the next world. The most famous artifact from the tomb is undoubtedly Tutankhamun's golden burial mask. This mask, which covered the mummy's face, is a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship. Made of solid gold and inlaid with semi-precious stones, the mask depicts the king with a calm, serene expression, wearing the striped meme's headdress and false beard that symbolize pharaonic power. The mask's intricacy and beauty have made it one of the most iconic symbols of ancient Egypt, capturing the imagination of people around the world. It was designed to protect the king's face and serve as a representation of his eternal image in the afterlife. In addition to the mask, Tutankhamun's tomb contained a series of 3 nested coffins, each more elaborate than the last. The innermost coffin, like the mask, was made of solid gold and weighs approximately 110 kilograms, about 243 pounds. This coffin held the mummified remains of the young pharaoh, enveloping him in gold, a material that the Egyptians believed had divine properties. The 2 outer coffins were made of gilded wood, adorned with intricate carvings and inlaid with precious stones. The sarcophagus, which housed the coffins, was also made of stone and covered with protective inscriptions and symbols. Beyond the burial chamber, the tomb contained rooms filled with an array of objects that spoke to the life of a pharaoh. One of the most striking features of the antechamber was the collection of gilded furniture, including beds, chairs, and couches, many of which were shaped like sacred animals. These pieces, intended for use in the afterlife, displayed remarkable craftsmanship and attention to detail. The royal throne found in the tomb, for example, was made of wood and covered in gold leaf, with a scene depicting Tutankhamun and his queen, Inkhesenemun, in a moment of intimacy. This throne, richly decorated with colored glass, semi-precious stones, and silver, highlights the luxury and wealth associated with the pharaoh's status. Weapons and military items were also included in the tomb, reflecting the traditional role of the pharaoh as a warrior and protector of Egypt. A number of finely crafted bows, arrows, and daggers were found, as well as shields and chariots. One of the most significant weapons was a ceremonial dagger with a blade made from meteoric iron, a rare and valuable material in ancient Egypt. This dagger, with its origins in the heavens, symbolized the divine power of the pharaoh. Tutankhamun's tomb also contained a variety of everyday items that the king might need in the afterlife. These included clothing, linens, sandals, and jewelry, all of which were made with the finest materials available. Chests filled with jewelry and precious stones, including amulets, necklaces, and rings, were found in abundance. These items were not only symbols of wealth and status, but also served a protective function, as many of the amulets were inscribed with prayers or spells designed to protect the king's spirit on his journey through the underworld. In addition to these personal items, the tomb housed numerous statues and images of gods and protective deities. These statues were intended to guard the tomb and assist the king in his transition to the afterlife. One of the most prominent statues was that of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead, who was responsible for embalming and guiding souls to the afterlife. The presence of these divine figures underscored the importance of religion in Tutankhamun's burial and reflected the deep spiritual beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. One of the most intriguing aspects of the treasures found in the tomb is the evidence they provide about the daily life of the pharaoh. Among the objects were game boards, musical instruments, and foodstuffs, all of which indicate that the king's life, both in this world and the next, was expected to be filled with entertainment and leisure. The inclusion of large quantities of food, wine, and perfume suggests that Tutankhamun's tomb was meant to be a self-sustaining world where the king could live in comfort and luxury for eternity. The craftsmanship and artistry of the items found in Tutankhamun's tomb are a testament to the skill of ancient Egyptian artisans. The objects were made using a wide variety of materials, including gold, silver, bronze, ivory, ebony, and lapis lazuli, each chosen for its symbolic meaning and aesthetic appeal. These treasures reflect the wealth and power of the pharaoh and the elaborate preparations that were made for his journey into the afterlife. The Curse of Tutankhamun. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 was one of the most significant archaeological finds in history, but it also gave rise to one of the most enduring and sensational myths of the modern era, the Curse of the Pharaohs. According to popular legend, those who dared to disturb the resting place of an ancient Egyptian king would be struck down by a supernatural curse. While there is no evidence to suggest that such a curse was real, the strange events surrounding the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb led many to believe that the young pharaoh had taken his revenge on those who opened his burial chamber. The origins of the curse myth can be traced back to the death of Lord Carnarvon, the British aristocrat who financed Howard Carter's expedition to find Tutankhamun's tomb. Only a few months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon died suddenly in Cairo from an infected mosquito bite that turned septic. His unexpected death at the age of 56, coupled with the dramatic nature of the tomb's discovery, fueled widespread speculation that Carnarvon had been the victim of a curse. The media, particularly the British press, quickly seized on the idea of a pharaoh's curse, and sensational headlines appeared in newspapers around the world. Stories emerged claiming that strange occurrences had happened within the tomb, including mysterious shadows, sudden illnesses, and strange noises. One of the most dramatic claims was that, at the exact moment of Lord Carnarvon's death, all the lights in Cairo went out, casting the city into darkness. Although this has since been dismissed as a coincidence, it added fuel to the growing belief that the curse was real. Soon after Carnarvon's death, others associated with the excavation also died under unusual or unexpected circumstances. George J. Gould, an American financier who visited the tomb, died of a fever shortly after his visit. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, a radiologist who had x-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, also passed away within a short time. The suddenness of these deaths only heightened the sense of mystery surrounding the tomb and led to more reports of the supposed curse. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the curse was the belief that Howard Carter himself, the man who led the expedition and opened the tomb, would eventually fall victim to it. However, Carter lived for another 16 years after the discovery, passing away in 1939 at the age of 64. His longevity compared to others involved in the excavation suggests that the curse may have been more myth than reality, but the stories persisted, keeping the legend alive for decades. One element that added to the curse's mystique was the supposed warning inscribed on the tomb's entrance. Some reports claim that an inscription had been found on the wall of the burial chamber, stating, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." However, no such inscription was ever discovered, and this claim appears to have been fabricated by journalists eager to capitalize on the curse story. While the idea of a curse is exciting, historians and scientists have offered more rational explanations for the deaths associated with Tutankhamun's tomb. One common theory is that many of the individuals who fell ill after visiting the tomb may have been exposed to harmful mold or bacteria that had developed inside the sealed tomb over the centuries. The tomb had been undisturbed for over 3,000 years, and the air inside may have contained dangerous spores that could cause respiratory infections or other illnesses. In an era before antibiotics, even a minor infection could prove deadly, particularly for individuals who were already in poor health. Another explanation is that the deaths associated with the tomb were simply coincidences. Lord Carnarvon, for example, was already in fragile health before the tomb was discovered. He had suffered from various ailments throughout his life, and his death from an infected mosquito bite, while tragic, was not entirely unexpected. The other deaths, such as those of Gould and Douglas Reed, may have been similarly coincidental, but the timing of their illnesses fed into the growing belief in the curse. The idea of the curse also appealed to the public's fascination with ancient Egypt and the supernatural. At the time of the tomb's discovery, Egyptology was a relatively new field, and many people viewed the mysterious and exotic world of the pharaohs as filled with secrets and magic. The notion that an ancient king could reach out from beyond the grave to punish those who disturbed his tomb was an irresistible story for both the media and the public. Despite the lack of concrete evidence supporting the existence of a curse, the myth of Tutankhamun's curse has endured for nearly a century. It has been the subject of numerous books, films, and documentaries, each retelling the tale with varying degrees of sensationalism. The curse has become an integral part of the story of Tutankhamun, adding a layer of intrigue to the historical and archaeological significance of the discovery. In reality, the tomb of Tutankhamun was no different from other royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, which were designed to protect the pharaoh's body and treasures from theft, not to exact supernatural revenge. The ancient Egyptians believed that their elaborate burial practices, including the construction of tombs and the use of spells from the Book of the Dead, would ensure the pharaoh's safe passage into the afterlife. While the Egyptians took great care to guard their tombs, there is no historical evidence to suggest that they believed in the kind of curses that have captured the modern imagination. Tutankhamun's legacy and modern research. Although Tutankhamun was a relatively minor figure during his lifetime, his legacy has grown enormously since the discovery of his tomb in 1922. Today, he is one of the most famous pharaohs of ancient Egypt, not because of his achievements in life, but because of the incredible wealth and beauty of the treasures found in his tomb. The discovery of his nearly intact burial site revolutionized the field of Egyptology, offering an unprecedented glimpse into the life, death, and burial practices of a new kingdom pharaoh. Beyond the treasures, modern research into Tutankhamun's mummy and DNA has shed light on the physical and genetic conditions that may have contributed to his early death. Tutankhamun's death at such a young age left Egypt without a strong successor, which contributed to a period of political instability. After his death, his advisors, including Horemheb, assumed control of the throne. I ruled briefly, followed by Horemheb, who went on to restore order in Egypt and lay the groundwork for the 19th dynasty, which would include powerful rulers like Ramses II. In terms of historical impact, Tutankhamun's short reign didn't have a lasting effect on Egyptian politics or society. However, his significance grew exponentially after the rediscovery of his tomb. One of the most important aspects of Tutankhamun's legacy is what his tomb tells us about ancient Egyptian burial practices. The tomb's layout, the arrangement of objects, and the sheer volume of treasures provide insights into the beliefs about the afterlife. The elaborate nature of the burial, with everything from furniture and chariots to food and cosmetics, suggests that the Egyptians believed the afterlife was a continuation of earthly existence, and the pharaoh needed to be prepared for every possible eventuality. The presence of statues of protected deities, such as Anubis and Osiris, along with texts from the Book of the Dead, further emphasizes the importance of the afterlife in ancient Egyptian culture. The discovery of the tomb also sparked new interest in the history of the 18th dynasty, a period of immense cultural and political significance in ancient Egypt. While Tutankhamun's immediate predecessors, like Akhenaten and his religious revolution, were already well known, the treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb brought new attention to the dynasty's art, politics, and religion. Artifacts from the tomb, such as his golden mask and elaborate jewelry, are now iconic representations of ancient Egypt's craftsmanship and wealth. These treasures continue to attract millions of visitors to museums worldwide, particularly the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where many of the artifacts are housed. Modern research into Tutankhamun's life and death has also greatly expanded our understanding of the challenges he faced as a young ruler. Advances in medical and genetic science have allowed researchers to analyze Tutankhamun's remains, offering new insights into his health. CT scans and DNA testing conducted in the early 2000s revealed that Tutankhamun suffered from a number of health problems, many of which were likely the result of royal inbreeding. His parents, Akhenaten and an unidentified woman, possibly Akhenaten's sister, were closely related, and this inbreeding appears to have contributed to a variety of genetic disorders. One of the most significant discoveries was that Tutankhamun had a clubfoot, a condition that would have made it difficult for him to walk unaided. This finding was supported by the numerous walking sticks found in his tomb, suggesting that he relied on them to move around. The young king also suffered from scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, and other skeletal abnormalities. These physical ailments, combined with the likely effects of malaria, which was detected in his DNA, would have made Tutankhamun's life as a pharaoh physically challenging. The genetic research also confirmed that Tutankhamun's family practiced intermarriage, a common custom among Egyptian royalty designed to preserve the purity of the royal bloodline. However, this practice likely contributed to the genetic defects found in Tutankhamun. The evidence of inherited diseases and deformities in his skeleton paints a picture of a young king who, despite his royal status, faced significant health challenges. In addition to his physical ailments, the CT scans revealed that Tutankhamun suffered a severe leg injury shortly before his death. This injury, which resulted in a fractured femur, may have contributed to his untimely demise. It is believed that the injury became infected, possibly exacerbated by his already weakened immune system due to malaria. While the exact cause of his death remains unclear, the combination of his genetic conditions, physical injuries, and infections likely played a role in his early death. Another aspect of Tutankhamun's legacy that has been the subject of modern research is the preservation of his tomb and the treasures within it. The tomb's relatively small size compared to those of other pharaohs has led historians to believe that it was not originally intended for Tutankhamun. His death may have come unexpectedly, leaving the royal court with little time to prepare a grander tomb. The hurried nature of his burial suggests that the tomb was originally built for a noble or a lesser member of the royal family and was repurposed after Tutankhamun's sudden death. Despite its modest size, the fact that the tomb remained largely intact for over 3,000 years has provided a wealth of information to Egyptologists. The tomb's preservation is remarkable, especially given the fact that many other royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings were looted in antiquity. Some believe that the small and relatively unassuming nature of Tutankhamun's tomb may have helped it escape the attention of grave robbers. Additionally, the discovery of items like jewelry, amulets, and statues has given researchers insight into the religious practices and funerary customs of the time. And so, the story of Tutankhamun, the boy king, draws to a close. From his mysterious rise to power to the incredible discovery of his tomb, Tutankhamun has captivated the world for centuries. His life, though short, offers a unique window into the grandeur and complexity of ancient Egypt. The legacy he left behind, preserved in gold and stone, continues to inspire curiosity, wonder, and endless fascination. His tomb may have been sealed for thousands of years, but the story of Tutankhamun will forever be open, inviting us to learn more about this enigmatic pharaoh. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life and mysteries of Tutankhamun. I hope you found this tale as fascinating as I did. Until next time, stay curious and let the whispers of history guide you.